Picture a woman standing in the middle of a room, not sitting, not lying down, standing. She's been standing on and off for the better part of 4 days. She's 69 years old. Her body is failing in a dozen ways at once. Her throat is so swollen she can barely swallow. Her fingers ache. Her legs tremble under her skirts, and every physician in England wants her in bed. And she will not go. Because she has worked out something that nobody dares say out loud. The woman standing in that room is the Queen of England, and the moment she lies down she may never stand up again. So she stands, hour after hour, day after day, staring at nothing, refusing food, refusing medicine, refusing the bed the way a soldier refuses to drop his sword. That is Richmond Palace, on the River Thames, in March of the year 1603. And you are in the room, not as a courtier, not as a lord. You are 15 years old. You carry firewood and cushions and messages, and you are close enough to smell the rosewater they burn to cover the smell of a dying body. You will spend the strangest month of your life in that palace, in rooms where the most powerful woman in the world is slowly, stubbornly, magnificently refusing to die on anyone's schedule but her own. You will learn why nobody in England is allowed to say what everyone in England is thinking. You will learn what a kingdom sounds like when it holds its breath. And on one black freezing night, you will hear a horse leave the palace gates at a gallop, carrying a secret north at 10 miles an hour, and you will understand that you have just heard the 16th century end. I make these history stories, and I genuinely don't know if you fall asleep to them, or if you just like lying in the dark hearing about dying queens and treasonous whispers and boys carrying cushions through freezing corridors at 3 in the morning. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. The trouble starts, as trouble always does in a royal household, with something small, a cushion. It is late February 1603, and you are kneeling on the floor of a gallery in Richmond Palace with a cushion in your hands, and you do not know where to put it. This sounds like nothing. It is not nothing. In this household, nothing is nothing. The cushion is velvet, crimson, stuffed with down, heavier than it looks. Maybe 4 pounds of it, dense and soft, with gold cord around the edges that bites into your palms when you grip it too hard. You have carried 11 of them from the wardrobe store, one trip at a time, down a corridor where the rushes on the floor have been swept back so your footsteps make no sound. Past 2 gentlemen ushers who watched you the way cats watch a bird, and into the withdrawing chamber next to the Queen's privy chamber, and now Mistress Aylmer, who has served in the household since before your father was born, is pointing at a patch of bare floor near the fire and hissing at you through her teeth. There, no, there, Lord above, boy, there. You set the cushion down where she points. She adjusts it 2 inches to the left. Then she looks at the arrangement. 11 crimson cushions laid out on the floor in a rough oval, like a nest built for some enormous bird. And her face does something you have never seen a grown woman's face do in this palace. It crumples, just for a second. Then it goes smooth again, courtier smooth, blank as a plastered wall. Why on the floor, you whisper? Because you are 15, and you have not yet learned that in this palace, in this month, questions are more dangerous than knives. Mistress Aylmer does not answer. She takes you by the sleeve. Her fingers are cold, always cold. The whole palace is cold. The fires cannot keep up with the river damp. And she pulls you to the door and out into the corridor. And only when the door is shut behind you does she put her mouth close to your ear. Because Her Majesty will not go to her bed, she says, and her legs will not hold her forever, and when they fail, she must have somewhere soft to fall. Then she straightens up, smooths her skirts, and walks away down the corridor as if she has just told you the price of candles. And you stand there, 15 years old, with the cold of the stone coming up through the soles of your shoes, understanding for the first time that the Queen of England, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who broke the Armada, the woman whose face is on every coin you have ever held, is going to die on a pile of cushions on the floor like a woman who fell down in her own kitchen, because she refuses, absolutely refuses, to lie down in a bed. Nobody has told you this. Nobody will tell you this. Telling you this is, in a very real legal sense, treason. That is the first rule you learn. Your name is Tom Aldry. You're 15 years old, the third son of a tenant farmer from Surrey, and you have been in royal service for 11 months, which makes you the newest and least important male creature in Richmond Palace, with the possible exception of the turnspit dogs. You got the place because your uncle keeps the accounts for a gentleman who serves a knight who serves the Lord Chamberlain, which is how everything works in England. A chain of men doing favours for men above them, all the way up to the throne. Somewhere at the bottom of that chain 11 months ago a favour trickled down and landed on you, and your mother cried and packed you bread and a spare shirt, and you walked to the river and took a boat upstream, and now you sleep in a room under the eaves with 5 other boys and you carry things. That is your whole profession. Carrying. Firewood mostly. Richmond eats firewood the way a horse eats hay, dozens of loads a day in winter, and the Queen's rooms must never ever go cold. Candles, coals in a brass pan with a lid, held out at arm's length so you don't scorch your livery, messages you're not allowed to read, folded and sealed, basins of water, chamber pots on bad days, cushions. Your hands show all of it. The skin across your knuckles is cracked from the cold and the water, thin red lines that split open and sting when you flex your fingers around a log. There is a burn scar on the inside of your right wrist, pale and smooth, from your second week when you tilted a coal pan wrong. Your shoulders have grown this year in a way that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with wood. At night, your forearms ache with a deep, dull throb, like the muscle itself is bruised, and you have learned to fall asleep to that ache the way other people fall asleep to rain. Richmond Palace itself is the Queen's favourite winter house, and you can see why even from the woodyard. It stands right on the Thames, 10 miles or so upstream from London, a great pile of brick and stone that old King Henry VII, this Queen's grandfather, rebuilt about 100 years ago after the old palace burned. It has 14 turrets capped with domes like onions, and on top of the domes are gilded weather vanes, dozens of them, and when the wind comes up the river the vanes all turn and sing, a thin metal keening high and strange, and on your first night here you lay awake in the attic listening to it and thought the palace itself was crying. The Queen came here in late January. That in itself told the older servants something. She moved from Whitehall in foul weather, a wet, blustering day, the kind of day no old woman should travel in, because she said Richmond was the warm winter box that would best shelter her old age. Those were more or less her words, passed down through the household the way everything is passed down, mouth to ear to mouth, growing a little in the telling. The warm box of her old age. She was 69 years old. She'd been queen for 44 years. 44 years. Think about what that means for the people around you. The cook, the gardener, the gentleman usher with the grey beard. Almost nobody in that palace, almost nobody in England, has ever lived a single day under any other ruler. Asking them to imagine England without Elizabeth is like asking them to imagine England without the Thames, and yet everyone knows. That is the unbearable thing about this winter, the thing that presses on the whole household like the low grey sky presses on the river. Everyone knows, and no one may say, "Here is the law," as it was explained to you by Harry Pole, the boy who sleeps beside you in the attic and has been in service 3 years longer than you, and considers himself your tutor in the arts of survival. It is treason, actual treason, the kind that ends with your insides shown to you on a public scaffold, to compass or imagine the death of the monarch. To imagine it. The lawyers argue about what that word means, but no servant boy is going to bet his belly on a lawyer's argument. And it is forbidden, separately and specifically, to discuss who will rule when the Queen is gone. She has never named a successor, not once, in 44 years. She has no child, no brother, no sister. The Tudor line ends in that swollen throat in the Privy Chamber, and she has spent her whole reign refusing to say what comes after, because, and this is her own logic, repeated by the old servants like scripture, the moment she names an heir, every ambitious man in England stops looking at her and starts looking at him. She said once that men do not worship the setting sun. So she has simply declined for 4.5 decades to admit that her sun sets, which means that right now, in February and March of 1603, the most important question in the entire kingdom, the question every single person from the Archbishop of Canterbury down to you, Tom Aldry, carrier of cushions, is thinking about every single hour, is a question that cannot legally be asked out loud. You want to know what that does to a palace? It makes it quiet. Wrongly quiet. A palace is normally a roaring place. Hundreds of people, kitchens going day and night, horses, dogs, deliveries, musicians rehearsing, laundry maids shouting across courtyards. Richmond still has all of that. The machine still runs, but a hush has settled over the top of it like snow. Men stop talking when other men come near. Conversations happen in window bays, two heads close together, and break apart the moment a third person's footsteps sound on the boards. You carry wood into a room where 3 gentlemen are standing, and all 3 of them stop speaking at once together, like a door closing, and watch you cross the room and wait, and you can feel their eyes on the back of your neck like a draft, and only when the latch clicks behind you does the murmur start again. Harry Pole puts it to you plainly one night in the attic, the 2 of you lying in the dark under shared blankets, because it is cheaper to be warm together, the weather vanes crying on the roof above. "Say nothing," he says, "whatever you see. You'll be in and out of those rooms because you're nobody, and nobody sees a nobody. And that means you'll see things clerks and knights would pay money to know. And if you ever say what you've seen, not to me, not to your mother, not to God in your prayers out loud, they won't punish you like a boy. They'll punish you like a man. Do you understand?" "Yes," you say. "No, you don't," he says, not unkindly. "But you will." He is right on both counts. The strange thing, the thing you will spend the rest of your life trying to explain to people who are not there, is that the Queen herself was fine at Christmas. Better than fine. The court kept Christmas at Whitehall, and the old ones say she danced. 69 years old, and she danced and watched plays, and received the ambassadors bolt upright under her canopy, with her face painted white, and her red wig dressed with pearls, and an Italian visitor swore she looked no more than 20 from a distance. From a distance. That is the whole art of this reign, the distance. Nobody is allowed close enough to see the truth, and the truth is managed, painted, wigged, propped, staged, lit by candles at flattering angles for 44 years. Then, in the middle of February, the distance began to fail. You can date it, more or less, the way the household dates it, by the death of a lady. The Countess of Nottingham died at the end of February. Catherine Howard, Kate Carey that was, the Queen's cousin, one of the very last living creatures who had known her since the beginning, a woman who had served in the bedchamber for decades. When the news came, something in the Queen broke that never mended. The old servants had seen her mourn before. She had buried nearly everyone she ever loved. That was the price of living so long. But this was different. She shut herself away. She wept in a way the women said they had never seen, hour upon hour, and would not be comforted, and would not do business. And the Privy Council waited in the outer rooms with papers she would not sign. And then she stopped eating. You know this because you carry the wood for the fire in the room off the privy kitchen where her food is dressed, and you see the dishes go up, and you see the dishes come down. Manchet bread, white as linen, broth, a little meat, minced fine because her teeth are mostly gone. That is a thing you learned this year and were shocked by. The Queen of England's teeth are black and few. Sugar did it. The Spanish ambassador wrote about it years ago. Everyone at court knows, and no one at court knows if you follow me. The dishes go up under covers, carried by men who walk like they're in church, and they come down barely touched, a spoon's worth gone from the broth, the bread broken but not eaten, day after day. The cook, a huge slab of a man named Martin who has fed her household for 20 years and weeps easily, stands over the returned dishes with his fists on the table and his jaw working, and says nothing, because there is nothing that can be said, and starts again. She has also, the whisper goes, refused her physicians. They beg to examine her. She will not be examined. They beg her to take physic. She will not take physic. There is a story that goes around the household in early March, and you believe it, because it sounds exactly like her. One of the great men, some say it was Cecil himself, the secretary, the little hunched man who runs England's business, told her that to content the people, she must go to bed, and she turned on him and said, "Little man, little man." The word must is not to be used to princes. Must is not used to princes. You're 15, and you hear that through 2 mouths and a wall, and even second-hand it raises the hair on your arms. Because you understand what it is. It is not vanity. It is the last weapon of a woman who has ruled men her whole life, with nothing but her wits and her presence. And who knows that her presence is now a swollen-throated, aching-fingered, sleepless old body, and whose wits are therefore the only garrison left in the castle. She cannot command her legs much longer, so she commands the grammar. Here is what your days are like in the first weeks of March while all this is happening above you. You wake at 5 in the black to Harry's elbow. The attic is cold enough that the inside of the little window has grown ferns of frost, and your breath is a grey plume, and the first thing you do every morning of your life is force your cracked hands closed and open, until the sting fades and the fingers answer. You dress in the dark by feel, shirt, doublet of the household livery, points tied with fingers that fumble at the first 3 and manage the rest. You break the ice on the water in the basin with your knuckle, a skin of ice, thin as a communion wafer, that snaps with a sound like a twig. And you wash your face because Mistress Aylmer checks, and the water is so cold it feels like being slapped by a ghost. Then wood. The woodyard at dawn is your parish church. You know every corner of it. The logs are beech and oak, split to the length of your forearm, and they are wet with river fog on the outside, and you learn to pick by weight and smell. A dry log rings faintly when you knock it against another. A wet one thuds. You load the leather sling until the strap grinds into your shoulder, 30, 40 pounds, and you carry it up the back stairs, and the stairs are the worst part. A tight stone spiral where the sling scrapes the wall, and your knees pop and your breath goes ragged by the second turn. 16 trips before most of the palace is awake. By the 8th trip you have stopped feeling your shoulder. By the 12th you have stopped feeling your opinions. The fires you feed are graded like everything else in this world. The outer chambers get sea coal in braziers, dirty and sulphurous. The presence chamber gets mixed coal and wood, but the rooms nearest the Queen get wood only, sweet wood, apple when there is apple. Because Her Majesty's nose is famous and ferocious. She once complained of the boots of a serving man 3 rooms away, and because coal smoke stains the tapestries. In those innermost rooms you also learn the second craft of your trade, which is silence. You do not drop a log. You do not clank the tongs. You lay each piece of wood down onto the fire like you're laying a baby into a cradle, easing it through your fingers the last inch so it settles without a knock, and you sweep the hearth with a goose wing, which makes no sound at all, and you back out of the room bowing to whoever is there, or bowing to nobody, because you bow to the rooms themselves now, everyone does. The rooms have become holy. And in those rooms, in the first week of March, you begin to see her. Understand, a boy like you is not supposed to see the Queen at all. There is a whole architecture designed to prevent it. The sequence of rooms, each one more restricted than the last. Guard chamber, presence chamber, privy chamber, withdrawing chamber, bed chamber, like the layers of an onion, with rank as the knife that cuts you deeper in. In an ordinary season, the innermost fires are laid before dawn while she sleeps, and topped up by grooms far grander than you, and a woodboy's whole universe stops 3 doors out. But this is not an ordinary season. The household is stretched like a drumhead. Half the great ladies are sick themselves or worn to rags from waiting. The grooms of the chamber are pulled into 100 errands. Doors that are supposed to be shut stand ajar because doctors and counsellors and chaplains come and go at all hours. And somewhere in the chain of harassed men above you, a decision is made without ever being spoken. The small, quiet boy with the goose wing, the one who never drops a log and never looks up and never speaks, he can go in. He is nobody. Nobody sees a nobody. So on the 4th or 5th day of March, in the grey hour after dawn, you carry apple wood into the withdrawing chamber, and she is there. You know it before you see her because the room feels different. Rooms with the Queen in them have a pressure, a thickness. Everyone in service says so, and you always thought it was flattery until you feel it yourself. A prickle across your scalp. An instinct older than manners telling you that something at the edge of your vision must not be looked at directly, the way you do not look at the sun. You keep your eyes down, as trained. You see the floor, you see the 11 crimson cushions, and you see, at the edge of your sight, standing near the window with 2 of her women hovering behind her, like moths behind a candle, a figure. She is small. That is the first shock, and you are ashamed of it instantly. All your life the Queen has been the size of a church door, in her paintings, in stories, in the coin in your purse. The figure by the window is a small old woman in a loose gown of silver white, without her great skirts, and this is the second shock, and your ears actually heat with the scandal of it, without her red wig. Her own hair is thin and grey-white, cropped close, and her women have covered most of it with a linen coif, but not all. Her face, turned 3/4 away from you toward the leaded glass in the river, is not painted this morning. It is the face of somebody's grandmother, hollow at the cheek, folded at the throat, with a nose grown beaky the way old noses do, and she is standing, perfectly still. One hand, long fingers, swollen at the knuckles, you can see the glint of rings sunk into the flesh, resting flat against the stone of the window frame, not gripping it, just touching it, the way you might touch the shoulder of an old friend. Looking out at the grey Thames sliding past, and the bare trees on the far bank, and the water meadows steaming with frost, as if she's expecting a boat. You lay the wood down piece by piece without one knock, sweep the hearth with the wing, back toward the door, bowing, and then she speaks. Not to you. You understand that at once, thank God, your heart nearly stops anyway. Not to her women either. To the window, maybe. To the river. Her voice is low and rough, half ruined, and afterward you will spend 50 years wondering if you heard her rightly, and you will decide that you did. I'm not sick, she says. I feel no pain, and yet I pine away. One of the women makes a small sound. The Queen does not turn. You get yourself out of the room and stand in the corridor with your back against the cold wall and your heart going like a rabbit and the smell of apple smoke on your hands. That evening, Harry Pole watches you across the trestle table at the servants' supper. Pottage, gone slightly scorched at the bottom of the kettle, so every spoonful has a bitter ghost of burnt in it, and yesterday's bread, hard enough at the crust that you soften it in the pottage first. And he says quietly, under the clatter of 40 other people eating, "You went in." "I carried wood," you say, "and..." You look at him, and you feel the whole day's weight in your mouth wanting out. The small grey woman, the standing, the voice. "I am not sick, and yet I pine away." And you look at Harry Pole, who is your friend, who warned you, whose warning was a gift, and you say, "The fire was low, I mended it." Harry looks at you for a long moment. Then something in his face settles like a scale finding balance, and he nods once and goes back to his pottage. That was the moment, you will think later. Not an oath sworn on a Bible, not a lecture from an usher, a boy saying nothing over burnt pottage. That was the moment you became a servant of the crown. Now let me widen the picture, because while you're laying fires in a hush, England outside those walls is doing something remarkable and terrifying. It is quietly, illegally, preparing for a future that officially does not exist. Start with the man you see most often in the outer rooms, Sir Robert Cecil, the Queen's secretary. You would not pick him out of a crowd as the most powerful man in England. He is small, smaller than you, with a crooked back that the cruel call a hunch, and the Queen, in her rough affection, calls him pygmy and elf-for. He is perhaps 40, with a pale, still clever face, and eyes that seem to weigh whatever they land on, including, once for one horrible second in a corridor, you. His father was old Lord Burghley, who ran England for the Queen for 40 years, And when the father died, the son slid into the father's place like a sword into a fitted scabbard. Cecil works. That is what strikes you, watching from doorways with wood in your arms. Everyone else in the palace this march is waiting. Cecil is working. Papers go in and out of his rooms all day and half the night. His candles, you know, because you supply them, burn to the socket. What you do not know, what almost nobody knows, is that for the past 2 years Sir Robert Cecil has been committing what the Queen would certainly regard as treason. He has been writing in cipher, in absolute secrecy, to King James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary Queen of Scots, the woman this Queen executed 16 years ago. James is the great-great-grandson of the first Tudor king. He is Protestant, he is experienced, he has sons, an actual heir with heirs, an almost forgotten luxury in England, and he is, by blood, the obvious successor. But the Queen has never named him, so Cecil has done it for her in the dark. A long, careful, deniable correspondence, numbers standing in for names. The Queen is one number, James another, Cecil himself another. Smoothing the road, calming the Scottish King's nerves, making sure that on the day the unsayable thing happens, the transition will already be built, waiting in the dark like a coach with the horses standing ready in the shafts. Is that betrayal? Or is it the deepest loyalty of all? Loving the kingdom enough to disobey the Queen's silence? Men will argue it forever. You are 15 and carrying firewood. All you know is that the small crooked man's candles burn all night, and that he does not look like a man who is waiting to be surprised. And below Cecil, all the way down the ladder, everyone else is making their own small preparations, each one deniable, each one damning. Couriers ride north more often than couriers used to. Certain lords develop sudden warm friendships with certain Scots. In London, 10 miles downstream, the merchants are quietly calling in debts, and the goldsmiths are quietly not lending, because nobody knows what money is worth on the far side of the unsayable day. The law courts hurry cases. Old men make their wills. And in the streets, people who have never seen a change of monarch in their lives, which is nearly everyone under 50. Trade rumours in alehouses in the special low voice the whole country has learned this winter. The treason voice, the voice you use for the thing you must not imagine and cannot stop imagining. Because here is what haunts them, the thing the old ones remember and the young ones have been told. The last time the succession was uncertain, England burned people. Within living memory, this country has lurched Catholic, Protestant, with each lurch paid for in blood. And across the water, Spain, beaten in 88, but not dead, watches England's old woman fail, and Catholic exiles print pamphlets arguing the Spanish Infanta's claim to the English throne, and in Ireland an exhausting war is barely done. If the handover is botched, if 2 claimants stand up at once, everyone over 40 knows exactly what it looks like, because their grandfathers told them. It looks like armies of Englishmen killing Englishmen in English fields. All of that, all of it, is balanced on the breath of one old woman standing at a window in Richmond, watching the river, refusing to lie down. No pressure on the boy carrying her firewood. Around the 10th of March, the standing begins in earnest, and the palace enters the strangest fortnight of your life. Until now, she has stood for hours at a time, then allowed herself to be persuaded onto a chair, then risen and stood again. Now the chair loses. She stands. Through a morning, through an afternoon. Her women take turns being near her, not holding her. She will not be held. Just near. hands half raised, like people standing under a tree in a wind, waiting for something to fall. The doctors confer in the outer chamber in Latin, which fools nobody. The whole household can read the shrugs. One of them is heard to say, and this goes around the palace in a day, that Her Majesty's illness is not in her body but in her mind, a settled melancholy, a sadness gone down into the bones, and that no physis in the world ever cured a patient who has decided not to be cured. You see her twice more that week, Wood in your arms, eyes down. Once she is standing in the middle of the withdrawing chamber, the middle nowhere near a wall or a window or a chair, just standing in open floor like a mast, with her eyes open and fixed on nothing, one finger pressed into her mouth. That detail is so strange, so childlike, that you flinch from it. The Queen of England standing in an empty patch of floor, sucking her finger like a worried girl. Her women stand around the walls, nobody speaks. The fire snaps once, loudly, as a log settles. Not your log, you would die of it. And nobody in the room even blinks. You mend the fire and get out. The second time she is speaking. Same low ruined voice, but with an edge on it now, addressed to a blur of dark robes at the edge of your vision, that you later learn was the Lord Admiral Nottingham, the dead Countess's husband, an old man himself, come from his own mourning to beg his queen to go to bed. And you hear her answer him. Every servant within 3 rooms hears it, because for one sentence the old voice finds its old size. If you were in the habit of seeing such things in your bed, she says, as I see when in mine, you would not persuade me to go there. Such things, in her bed. You carry that sentence out of the room like a live coal in your chest. What things? You're 15. Your mind runs to ghosts, and why not? Count her dead. A mother, beheaded by her father before the Queen was 3 years old. A young stepmother, beheaded. Her own cousin, Mary of Scotland, beheaded with her signature on the warrant. They say the ink of it haunted her more than the axe. Essex, her last favourite, the beautiful, reckless man half England loved. Beheaded 2 years ago last month after his idiot rebellion. They say she sat in the dark for days after. Leicester, dead. Walsingham, dead. Burley, dead. Kate, dead 3 weeks. 69 years of outliving everyone you love, and now the bed is full of them, and the only place they cannot reach you is on your feet. So she stays on her feet, and when, somewhere in that second week of March, her legs finally begin to fail her by inches, she does not go to the bed. She goes down, slowly, over days, fighting for every inch, first leaning, then propped, then lowered by her women, onto the cushions. Your cushions. The 11 crimson cushions on the floor, refreshed and rearranged and added to until there are 20, 30 of them. A whole soft landscape of velvet and down on the floor of the withdrawing chamber. And there she lies, on the floor of her palace, fully dressed, propped on one arm or flat on her back staring at the ceiling, her finger at her lips, silent now for longer and longer stretches. Not the bed, never the bed. The cushions are her compromise with gravity, and it is a compromise on her terms, because a bed means patient, means invalid, means deathbed, means the word everyone is not saying. But a queen may lie on cushions if she pleases, the way she might at a picnic, the way she might in a poem. Even now, especially now, she is still editing the story. 4 days she lies on those cushions. Some say 3, some say 4. You are one of the few people alive who can count it exactly, because you serve that fire twice a day, dawn and dusk, and you count 4 dawns. I want to slow down here and put you fully inside one of those services, because you will remember it for the rest of your life, and because this, not battles, not proclamations, is what history actually feels like from inside. It is the dawn of the 3rd cushion day, perhaps the 20th of March. You're carrying 6 pieces of apple wood in the leather sling, and the sling creaks, so before the last corridor you stop and take the wood into your bare arms instead, all 6 pieces, cradled like a swaddled child against your chest, bark biting through your sleeves. The gentleman usher at the door, Master Conway, grey-bearded, kind on Tuesdays, looks at you, looks at the wood, and opens the door himself so the latch makes no noise. The room, first, by smell, because the room is dim and smell arrives before sight. Rosewater, sprinkled fresh, sweet, and sharp. Under it, wax, good beeswax candles, 6 of them burning even at dawn, and the honeyed smell of them. Under that, herbs strewn among the rushes at the edges of the room, meadow sweet and something bitter. Under that, wood smoke, apple, your own contribution. And under everything, faint but absolute, the smell that all the rosewater in England is failing to cover, the smell of an old, sick, unwashed human body. She will not be changed, is the whisper, will not be undressed, will hardly suffer her women to touch her. So the smell is there, low and constant, and everyone in the room lives inside it and pretends they do not. One more thing seen and not seen. The light, grey from the window, gold from the candles, and the 2 lights do not mix. They lie against each other in the air like oil and water. The sound, almost none. That is what strangers could never believe. A room with 8, 10 people in it. Ladies on stools against the wall, a doctor, a chaplain, sometimes an usher. And the loudest thing in it is the fire. You can hear the candles. You can genuinely hear candles burn, a tiny liquid flutter. If a room is silent enough, and this room is, under it, just at the edge of hearing, breathing hers, slow and with a faint catch in it now, a little snag at the top of each breath like cloth catching on a nail, and on the floor in the middle of the room on the landscape of crimson cushions the shape. You do not look. You've trained yourself so hard not to look that you see her only in fragments at the rim of your vision over the 4 days. A silver-white sleeve fallen back from a forearm gone thin as a distaff. The sole of one small slipper, worn shiny at the ball of the foot. Worn, you realise with a jolt, by all that standing. A hand, palm up on the velvet, fingers curled, rings sunk in swollen flesh. And once, on the 3rd day, the coronation ring is gone from where it should be, and there is a pale groove in the finger where it sat for 44 years, and you learn later it had grown into her flesh and they sawed it off, the ring, months ago before all this, and the whole court had shuddered at the omen. A wisp of grey hair escaped from the coif, lying across a cushion like a crack in the crimson. You kneel at the hearth. The fire has burned to a bed of coals, orange under grey ash, breathing heat at your face. You lay the first piece of wood down through your fingers, easing it. The trick is to let the log roll off your fingertips the last half-inch, so it meets the coals rolling, not dropping. And it settles with a sound no louder than a man shifting in his sleep. 2nd piece. 3rd. Your knees ache on the stone. The heat tightens the cracked skin of your knuckles and makes them sting, and you keep your face still. 4th piece. 5th. 6th. Sweep the hearthstone with a goose wing, feathers hissing softer than a whisper. New flames climb. The light in the room warms by 1 degree, and then, as you gather the sling and rise to go, it happens, the only time in your life. She turns her head on the cushions. You feel it before you see it. That pressure, that prickle. And you make the mistake, the one mistake in 11 months of glancing up. The Queen of England is looking at you. Her eyes are dark. You always heard golden brown. In this light they are just dark, sunk in a web of folds, and they are not clouded at all. That is the thing that goes through you like cold water. Everything else about her is failing, and the eyes are entirely terribly awake. They rest on you, on your face, your livery, the goosewing in your fist. There is no expression you have a name for, not anger, not kindness, something more like recognition is the closest word you ever find. As if she's looking at the fireboy of Richmond and seeing behind him 60 years of fireboys in a row, every silent child who ever kept her rooms warm, all the anonymous machinery of her long, long life, and marking it once before the end, registering that you exist. It lasts perhaps 2 seconds. Then her eyes move past you, back to the middle distance, back to whatever she watches there, and you are released. You bow to the floor, to the cushions, the full bow, the one reserved for the throne, and you back out of the room, and Master Conway shuts the door behind you without a sound, and you get 3 turns down the back stairs before your legs give, and you sit down hard on the cold stone in the dark, hugging the empty sling, shaking like a wet dog. Not from fear. You spend years working out what it was and never quite manage it. The nearest you come is this. For 2 seconds you were seen by the sentry itself, right before it closed its eyes. Meanwhile, because a palace is a body, and while the head lies on cushions, the stomach still growls. The ordinary work of Richmond grinds on, and it is in the ordinary work that you measure the crisis best. The kitchens tell you first. Martin the cook now dresses 2 entirely separate dinners for the Queen every day, one at 11 and one at 5, each a small masterpiece of soft things. Barley creams, almond milk, a capon boiled to threads and pounded in a mortar until it is nearly a paste, jellies the colour of church glass, and each one comes back and each one is scraped, untouched, into the alms tub for the poor at the gate, so that the beggars of Richmond town are for 3 weeks in March of 1603, eating better than the Queen of England. Martin cooks on anyway. On the worst morning, you see him stand over a return tray, lift the cover, look at the unmarked surface of a cream he seasoned himself, and put the cover back down as gently as if he were covering a face. The stables tell you second. Horses are being kept ready that have no business being ready. You carry no wood to the stables, but Harrypole has a cousin among the grooms, and the cousin says the word is, certain gentlemen's horses are to stand shod, fed, and girthed from dusk to dawn. Post horses, fast ones, nobody says why. Everybody knows why. Somewhere north of here, 5 days hard riding away in Edinburgh, a Scottish king goes to sleep every night wondering, and certain gentlemen intend to be the first hoofbeats he hears, and one of those gentlemen you now see daily hanging about the privy gallery with the studied idleness of a cat pretending not to watch a mousehole, Sir Robert Carey. Remember the name, he matters tonight. He is about 42, lean, weathered, a hard rider famous for it. This is a man who once walked from London to Berwick on a bet, and he is the dead Countess of Nottingham's brother, which makes him kin to the Queen, who has known him since he was a boy, and calls him, in her better moods, Robin. He is also, not to put too fine a point on it, ambitious, in debt, and out of great office. and he has worked out precisely what the rest of the court is working out, that the first man to kneel before King James with the news will never be poor again. Carey has already, quietly, ridden the North Road for years as a border officer, arranged relays of horses. He has written to Edinburgh. He is not subtle, and the council knows it and disapproves. There are proper channels for such news. Official channels, and a lone kinsman galloping north with it is exactly the kind of loose thread they dread. But Carey has one advantage over the Privy Council of England. His sister was the Queen's oldest friend, and grief opens doors that policy cannot. You watch him wait that last week. He is good at it, the way hunters are good at it. He plays cards in the outer chamber for small stakes and loses gracefully. He walks the gallery. He's charming to the ladies going in and out of the sick room, and the ladies, worn to threads, tell him things, and the news he's waiting on gets worse by the day, and you know it before almost anyone because of the fires. On the fourth cushion day, the 21st of March, a Monday, the order comes down at last, and it comes not as triumph, but as defeat. Her Majesty is moved to her bed. There was no persuading in the end, the whisper says. There was only weakness. The great ones tell each other she consented. The women who lifted her know better. Her legs would not answer even to lie on the floor any more. Her breath would not come lying flat, and so they raised her from the cushions. It took 4 of them, and she who weighed almost nothing fought them with almost nothing, which was somehow the worst of all. And they bore her into the bedchamber and laid her on the great bed, propped high on bolsters so she could breathe, and she did not speak. And you know what it means. Everyone in the palace knows what it means. She knew it first and best of all, which is why she stood for 4 days and lay on a floor for 4 more. The bed is the last room of the onion. There's nothing inside it but the end. From that day, your work changes. The bedchamber fire must never fall low day or night. Warmth is the last physic she will accept. And so the wood boys go on to watches like sailors. You draw the middle night watch, midnight to dawn, you and the goose wing and a rushlight, sitting on a joint stool in the passage outside the bedchamber door with 3 baskets of apple wood at your feet, waiting to be beckoned. And so it comes about, by nothing but the ordinary rotation of drudgery, that the 3rd son of a Surrey tenant farmer is one of the few dozen human beings physically present in Richmond Palace, awake in the innermost passage on the last 3 nights of the Tudor age. Here is what the nights are like. The passage is stone and narrow, and the cold in it after midnight is not like day cold. It is patient. It finds the gap between your collar and your neck, the seam at your ankle, the worn place at your elbow, and it settles in. You learn to sit on one foot and then the other. You learn that a rushlight, which is a reed dipped in mutton fat, burns with a small spitting hiss and smells like a kitchen, and gives just enough light to fail to see by. Down the passage, at the far door, 2 yeomen of the guard stand with halberds, and at some point in the deep hours their discipline softens into stillness, and you can hear one of them breathing through a whistling nose, and that whistle becomes the clock of your watch. Through the bedchamber door, muffled, you hear the room, cold settling, the rustle of a woman's skirts as the watchers change places, low voices at intervals, the ladies, the doctor, and under it, when everything else pauses, the breathing. It has changed since the cushion days. The snag at the top of each breath has thickened. There is a wet, labouring note in it now, effortful like someone climbing stairs very slowly, forever. Her throat, the whisper says, swollen almost shut, She cannot swallow. She cannot now speak. The voice that ruled England for 44 years, the voice that gave the Tilbury speech in armour with the Armada at sea, that told Parliament, though God hath raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves. That voice went out sometime on the 22nd of March like a candle in a draught, and the last tool left to the greatest communicator of the age is gesture, hand signs, a grip, her eyes. Twice a night, 3 times, the door opens and a lady's face, Mistress Southwell, young, hollow-eyed, or old Lady Scrope, Carey's other sister, remember her too, appears in the gap and beckons, and you carry wood through the dimness past the foot of the great bed with your eyes on the floorboards, and you feed the fire silently, and the room smells of rosewater and wax and sickness, stronger every night, and you back out. You never look at the bed again after that once on the cushions. You have had your 2 seconds of her eyes. You know without being told that they were the whole of your wages paid in advance for everything you are doing now. On the night of the 22nd, something happens that you will tell your grandchildren with the fire down low, and they'll not quite believe you, and it will be true. It is deep in the watch, 2 or 3, the dead hollow of the night. The palace is as silent as it is capable of being, and through the bedchamber door you begin to hear, of all the sounds in the world, music, soft, strings and a breath instrument, a consort, viols, you think, and a recorder or a soft flute, playing something slow and old-fashioned and infinitely gentle, at the very edge of hearing, so quiet that the fire in the room half covers it. You sit bolt upright on your stool. For 1 full minute, 15 years old, alone in a freezing passage in the middle of the night, you honestly cannot decide whether the sound is coming from inside the room or from somewhere else, somewhere worse, and the hair stands up on your arms. Then the door opens for wood, and you see them. 3 of the Queen's own musicians in their livery, seated on low stools in the corner of the dying Queen's bedchamber, playing to her in the dark, called for. The whisper next day says she called for them, signed for them, rather with her hands, since her voice was gone, and the council let it be known abroad that Her Majesty was merry and listened to music. See how well she does. But the women in the room knew, and you knew, kneeling at that fire with a veil breathing behind you in the candle dark. It was not merriment. It was a woman who had loved music all her life, who played the virginals finely, who danced galliards into her 60s, choosing what she wished to hear on her way out instead of weeping instead of doctors, arranging, with the last of her strength, one final scene to her own taste. You lay 6 pieces of apple wood on that fire, one by one, rolling each off your fingertips into the coals without a knock, while the musicians played and the candles fluttered, and the laboured breathing kept its own slow time underneath the melody like a bass line. It is the single strangest room you will ever kneel in, and when you back out and the door closes, the music goes on, faint through the oak, and you sit back down on your stool in the black passage and listen to a Queen's chosen last songs bleed through a door, and the weather vanes cry faintly on the roofs far above, and you think, remember this. Whatever else you forget, remember this, and you do. And while the palace holds its breath, take one walk with me outside the walls, because you're still a boy with a half-day free once a fortnight, and on one of those half-days in mid-March you go down into Richmond town, and the town teaches you what the kingdom is feeling better than any councillor could. The town lives off the palace the way a village lives off a river. Victuallers, boatmen, laundresses who take the household overflow, an alehouse called the Red Lion where the grooms drink, a smith whose whole trade some weeks is palace horses, and the town knows. Of course the town knows. Half of it has kin inside the walls, and the town is doing what the whole of England is doing, which is preparing without admitting it. The smith has more horses in his yard than you have ever seen there, gentlemen's horses, being shod all round. New shoes on hooves that do not need them yet because their owners want iron under them the day the road matters. The chandler has sold out of black cloth, sold out, in March, and more bespoke from London. And when a woman in the shop asks what the black is for, loudly, the way you ask a question you want overheard, the chandler says, "Lent, mistress," with a face like a jug, and every person in that shop looks at the floor. In the Red Lion you sit in a corner with your small beer, and you listen a fireboy's other trade, and you hear the treason voice everywhere, that special low register, and you notice what they do instead of naming things. A carter says, "When the weather changes." A boatman says, "Come the new moon," prices will answer. An old woman by the fire says to nobody, "I buried 2 husbands. You always know the week. The house knows before the doctor." And a neighbour says, "Hush," without any force at all, the way you say hush to something true. Nobody says Queen. Nobody says dying. Nobody says King of Scots. The whole room talks about weather and moons and prices, and every soul in it is talking about exactly one thing, and it strikes you. 15, in a corner, with beer you're not quite old enough for, that you're watching an entire country practice the skill you've been learning all winter in the passage, how to carry what must not be dropped, silently, together. On the way back up to the palace you pass the church and the door stands open, a weekday, and inside there are more people than a weekday has any right to hold. A dozen kneeling scattered among the pews in working clothes, mud on their pattens, no service, no priest even. Just people who have come in off the lane in the middle of a Tuesday to kneel a while. And you know, the way you now know everything nobody says, exactly whose name is inside every one of those bowed heads. She's been prayed for in that church, by law and by custom, every Sunday of every year of the lives of everyone kneeling there. Lord, save the Queen. The words have worn a groove. And now the parish is coming in on weekdays, unasked, to press on the groove while it can still be pressed. You stand at the back for a minute with your cap in your hands. You do not kneel. Some scruple of your station stops you, as if kneeling among them would be claiming a grief above your rank. Then you understand that this is foolish, that grief is the one commons left in England, the one field never enclosed. And you kneel on the stone at the very back, and you pray for her too, with your burned fingers laced. And it is the first time in your life a prayer has felt like carrying wood, heavy, real, needed upstairs. 2 more people enter your life in those last days, and each of them leaves something in you, the way people do when everything is heightened. So let me give them to you properly before the last night comes. The first is one of the musicians. You find him the morning after that midnight consort, in the base court at first light, and you know him by his instrument case, a viol in a wool bag slung on his back like a swaddled child, and by his face, which has the particular hollowness of a man who has been awake all night, doing something that has taken more out of him than staying awake ever could. He is perhaps 50, grey at the temples, and he is standing by the water trough breaking the skin of ice with the heel of his hand, over and over, not to drink, just breaking it, staring at nothing, and you recognize the state because you have been in it, and against every rule of your education you speak first. Was it, you begin, and stop, because there is no legal end to that sentence. He looks at you, takes in the livery, the sling, the wood dust on your sleeves, works out in about 1 second exactly who you are and where you sit and what you have therefore heard through what door. You're the fire boy, he says, the night one. Yes, master. He nods slowly, goes back to breaking the ice, and then, because grief loosens what fear tightens, he talks, quietly to the trough as much as to you, his breath smoking in the cold. 40 years I've played for her, my father before me. She knows every one of us by name, knew. He hears himself change the tense and his jaw tightens and he pushes on. You cannot think what she was, boy, in her prime, and I'll not try to tell you because you'd only nod and it can't be nodded at. I'll tell you the one thing instead. Last night she signed for the old songs. Not the new ones, not the clever ones. Songs from the old king's time, her father's time. Things she'd have heard when she was your age, younger. He flexes his hand, red from the ice. A man plays for a queen 40 years. He plays for the crown, do you follow me? The state, the occasion. Last night, first time in my life, I played for her, for the woman only. Smallest audience I ever had, and the greatest, both at once. He shoulders the viol. You keep her rooms warm, do you? He says. It is not a question, and there is something under it, an accounting, one servant auditing another. Yes, master, as best I can. Then you and I have the same profession this month, he says. Comfort. That's the whole of it now. No more glory in this house. Just comfort in small loads carried upstairs. Do it well. And he starts away across the court and then stops and half turns and gives you the sentence you will carry out of Richmond along with the pin. They'll tell you after that you were nobody here, you let them. But mind this, the last thing she'll have of this world are warmth and music, and half of that is yours. Nobody carries that. And he has gone through the arch, and you stand by the broken ice with your ears ringing, and you do not even know his name, and it does not matter in the slightest. The second is a yeoman of the guard, and he teaches you by night what the musician taught you by morning, though his lesson is delivered mostly with a boot. It is the night of the 22nd, the music night in fact, in its earliest hours, long before the viols, and it begins with a smell. You are on your stool in the passage, drowsing upright the way you have learned to, when your nose wakes before you do. Smoke, wrong smoke, not hearth smoke, but sharper, dirtier, with a stink of burning fat in it, and close. You are on your feet before your mind finishes the thought, because 11 months of fire service has built the thought into your legs. Something is burning that should not be. You find it fast because your nose is young and the palace is still. Not the bedchamber, God, not the bedchamber, but the small closet off the withdrawing chamber where the night lights are kept. A wool cresset, one of the iron baskets that hold a burning light, has been left too near a shelf, and on the shelf a wooden box of rushlights has caught. Mutton fat and reeds, and it is burning with small, fast, greasy flames, and above it, one shelf up, sit 24 wax candles in paper, and above that, the dry panelling of a 400-room wooden-hearted palace, with a dying queen asleep 60 feet away. Here is what you learn about yourself in the next 40 seconds, and it surprises you your whole life. You do not shout. Shouting is the correct thing. Fire in a palace at night, you rouse the guard. That is the law of every household in England. and you will never fully defend what you do instead, except to say that you had spent a month in a house where silence was the medicine, where her rest was the last thing anyone could give her, and some deep, stupid, loyal part of you weighed waking the palace against a box of burning rushes and decided the rushes were yours to handle. You snatched the box by its cold corner, the far corner, the one instinct finds, and it sears your fingers anyway through the last inch of wood, a bright white bar of pain across 3 fingertips, and you half throw, half carry it the 6 steps to the closet's little stone window bay, and you upend the water jug that stands there for the night women over the whole mess, box, flames, shelf, and all. The hiss is enormous in the silence. The steam smells like a kitchen in hell. The dark comes down doubled, and then a hand takes you by the back of the collar and lifts you very nearly off the floor. The yeoman, the whistling-nosed one, whose stillness you had clocked every night and mistaken for sleep, which is the last time in your life you mistake a soldier's stillness for sleep, holds you at arm's length in the dark with one fist, while with the other hand he checks the shelf, the cresset, the drowned box, the panelling above, pressing his palm flat against the wood to feel for heat, thorough as a physician, all in total silence. Then he sets you down, marches you by the collar out into the passage, puts his face down level with yours, close enough that you can smell the leather and tallow of him, and delivers, in a whisper that has more iron in it than most men shouting, the worst dressing down of your life, that you are a fool, that boys who fight fires alone in the dark are found as bones, that his own grandfather saw this palace's forerunner burned to the ground in one night in old King Henry VII's time, the whole of it, from a fire no bigger than that box, and that is why there is a palace here at all, the old one being ash, and that if you ever again smell smoke and do not first wake him, he will personally see to it that you're sent home to Surrey in a basket. Then he straightens up, looks down the passage at the bedchamber door behind which the breathing labours on, uninterrupted, unknowing, looks back at you, and adds, in a completely different voice, gruff and low, "Quick, though, you were quick," and he resumes his post and his stillness, and that is the whole of your commendation, and you sit back down on your stool with your 3 burned fingertips in your mouth, tasting mutton fat and shame and something else underneath that you're too young to name and will later recognise as pride. The blisters rise by morning, 3 of them in a row like peas, and for the rest of the vigil every log you lay costs you a small bright bite of pain, and you find you do not resent it. The palace did not wake. She did not wake. Your fire law held, your nerve held. The water was where the night order said water must always be. Comfort in small loads, carried upstairs, and once, when needed, defended in the dark. Nobody above the passage ever hears of it. Mistress Aylmer sees the blisters at wood issue, takes your hand, turns it over, looks at the 3 peas, looks at you. You say the coal pan tipped. She looks at you 1 second longer than the lie deserves. She has run wood boys for 30 years. She has seen every burn there is and knows the shape of each one's cause like a shepherd knows his ewes. And then she gives you back your hand and says only, "Goose grease, tonight, not Sunday," which is how you learn that in a great household mercy, like everything else, moves silently or not at all. The 23rd of March, 1603, is a Wednesday, and it is the last full day, and the palace knows it the way animals know weather. You come off your watch at dawn and cannot sleep, so you do what everyone in the household is doing, which is work with half a soul and listen with the other half. and all day the reports come down through the layers of the house like sediment settling through water, and by dusk everyone from the Lord Admiral to the turnspit boys has assembled the same picture. In the morning, the Archbishop of Canterbury is sent for, John Whitgift, an old man himself, past 70, the Queen's own churchman these 20 years. She calls him her little black husband, one of those rough pet names she gives the men she trusts. When the Archbishop is sent for, no lie, the council tells the ambassadors matters any more. Everyone knows what an archbishop at the door means, and at some point that day, and you will hear this told 100 ways over the next 50 years, and I will tell you honestly that the tellings do not agree, and tell you the one the bedchamber women themselves put about since they were the only ones there. The council comes to the bedside for the last time to ask the question. The only question. The one that has been illegal to ask for 44 years, and can now be asked because the law is dying with her. Madam, who shall succeed you? She cannot speak. Her voice is 2 days gone. So they name names to her, one by one, watching her face and her hands, like men playing a guessing game with everything on earth at stake. And when the King of Scots is named, so the women swear, so Lady Scrope will tell it, so it will be written. The dying queen raises her hands to her head, and joins them there, above her brow, fingers to fingers, in the shape of a crown. Did it happen? I will be straight with you, lying here at the dark 400 years later. No one can prove it. Some who were near said she made the sign. Some said she was past making any sign at all by then, and that the crown of hands was invented within days by the very men who needed James's succession to look like her blessing rather than their arrangement. Cecil's coach, remember, standing ready in the dark all this time, needing only her hand waved vaguely toward it. Maybe she signed. Maybe grief and hope built the sign out of a twitch. What is certain is this. Within hours, everyone at Richmond has heard about the hands above the head, and everyone needs it to be true. And in politics, a sign that everyone needs is stronger than a sign that merely happened. In the evening, about 6 of the clock, the Archbishop goes in to her. You know, because you're back in the passage, you traded a boy for the early half of the night. You could not have stayed away, and I think Master Conway knew it and let it be. And you see old Whitgift pass, black robes, white face, and the door swallows him. And what happens inside comes out afterward through Mistress Southwell and the others, and it is one of the finest things in the whole long story, so I will give it to you as they gave it. The Archbishop kneels at the bedside and prays. He is over 70, and the floor is stone under a carpet, and his knees are bad. He prays a long time. Then, being weary, he blesses her and makes to rise and leave. And the Queen, voiceless, dying, past food and physic and speech, grips his hand and will not let go, and signs more. So the old man kneels back down on his aching knees and prays on. Another long while. Wonderful sweetness, one witness called it. He spoke of the joys of heaven and of what she was going to, not what she was leaving. Again he tires. Again he blesses her. Again he tries to rise. Again the hand closes on his. More. They say he prayed until his knees would barely hold him, and the watchers wept into their sleeves, an old archbishop and an old queen holding hands in the candlelight, one of them pouring out words and the other one drinking them, and drinking, and drinking, and signing for more. The woman who had commanded everything for half a century, whose last command on earth, given with a grip of swollen fingers because nothing else was left her, was, keep praying, do not stop, stay. It is deep dark by the time Whitgift comes out, and he walks past your stool in the passage like a man walking in his sleep, and you stand and bow, and he does not see you, and that is right. Nobody sees a nobody. You have made a life's education out of it. Then the palace settles into the last night, and you are in it. Understand the scene now, the whole board, because every piece is about to move at once. In the bedchamber, the Queen, propped high on bolsters, turned on her side now, one hand under her cheek, they said after, like a child settling to sleep, her women around the bed, a chaplain praying low, the fire, your fire, burning steady. In the outer chambers, councillors who will not go home, dozing in chairs in their furs, and Cecil not dozing at all. In the courtyard below, shod horses standing in the dark, breathing steam. 10 miles downstream, London, where the council has already quietly this very week taken precautions nobody announces. The city watches doubled, known troublemakers gathered up, ports watched. A kingdom being wrapped carefully in cloth like a glass before a journey. 400 miles north, Edinburgh asleep. And in a stone passage in the middle of it all, a boy on a joint stool with 3 baskets of apple wood, a spitting rushlight, cracked knuckles, and instructions to keep one fire alive. You will be asked all your life once people learn where you were. What was it like the night the Queen died? And you'll never be able to make them understand that the honest answer is quiet. The quietest night you ever knew. No thunder, no comet. The comet had come and gone months before, and the old people had crossed themselves at it. Just a long cold stillness, the whistle of a guardsman's nose, the river running in the dark outside the walls, and behind one oak door, a breathing that you had been listening to for so many nights that you heard it even when you could not hear it, the way a miller hears his wheel. And somewhere between 2 and 3 of the clock, in the very pit of the morning of Thursday the 24th of March, the wheel stopped. You cannot say you heard the moment. Nobody heard the moment. That was the mercy of it. The thing even her enemies granted her. Mildly like a lamb, one of the watchers wrote after, easily like a ripe apple from the tree. No struggle at the end, after a life that was nothing but struggle. The labouring breath grew slower and shallower and further apart, and you did hear that through the door in the last hour, the lengthening gaps, each silence a little longer than the last, and you found you were leaning forward on your stool into each silence with your own breath held, and each time the next breath came, ragged and small, yours came too. Until one silence came that did not end. You sit in it. You do not know how long. The rushlight spits. The guardsman's nose whistles down the passage, oblivious. And then, through the door, very soft, a sound you've never heard from that room in all these nights. A woman beginning to weep and being hushed, and another sound under the hushing cloth and movement. Several people rising at once. Then the door opens, not the beck and gap, but wide, and light falls into the passage, and Mistress Southwell is standing in it with a candle, and her face is wet and perfectly calm, the 2 things at once, and she does not beckon for wood. She says, to you, 'cause you're the only living soul in the passage besides the guards, and somebody has to be told first, and history has a sense of humour, she says in a voice like a folded sheet. Go down and bid them send up Master Secretary, and mend the fires in the great chamber. That is all. That is how you learn. No bell, no cry, no proclamation. Bid them send up Master Secretary and mend the fires. The very first order of the new age of the world is given to a 15-year-old wood boy, and it is about warmth and Cecil. And you go down the black spiral stairs 2 at a time, with your heart slamming and your rushlight streaming and the enormous unsayable fact filling your chest like cold water. She is dead. The Queen is dead. The word is legal now. The sun is down, and you cannot say it even now. Even to the yawning groom you shake awake at the bottom of the stairs. You say what you were told to say. Master Secretary, the Great Chamber, fires. Elizabeth Tudor, Queen of England, France and Ireland, is dead at 69, in the 45th year of her reign, between 2 and 3 in the morning, the 24th of March, 1603. And here is the detail that the lawyers and the priests will chew on for years, the detail that feels like she planned it, though not even she could have planned it. In the old calendar, the year ends on the 24th of March. New Year is the 25th. She has died in the last hours of the last day of the year, 1602, old style, on the very doorstep of the year, with the old year going out under her like a tide. The last Tudor did not merely die, she waited for the page to turn and went out with it. Now watch what happens in the next 4 hours, because it is one of the great quiet thrillers of English history, and you are standing in the middle of it with a wood basket. The palace does not erupt. That is the first astonishment. You half expected. What? Bells, wailing, running feet. Instead, Richmond closes around the news like a fist around a coin. Within the hour the gates are shut. Not the ordinary night shutting, shut, barred and manned with orders that no one passes out. The council's first act in the new world is to build a wall around the fact of it. Because think of what they are holding. The throne of England is at this moment legally empty. The Queen named no heir in any law or testament. A sign made with dying hands is not a statute. Until the council proclaims James, until the words are said publicly, properly, irreversibly in London, the kingdom is a held breath. If the news runs loose before the proclamation is ready, anything can catch fire. A mob, a rival claim, a Spanish ship, a panic in the markets. So, gates barred. The news is to travel to London inside official skulls only and nowhere else. You learn the gates are shut because you're sent with coals to the porter's lodge as the sky goes grey, and you see the porters turning back a milkwoman, of all people, a milkwoman with her yoke and pails, ordinary morning business, and the porter will not open the wicket even to her, and the two of them stand arguing through the grille in the half-dark, and behind the porter's shoulder you see 2 yeomen of the guard standing where no yeomen ever stand at dawn, and the milkwoman's voice climbs. She has customers, the milk will turn, and the porter's voice stays flat as a plank. No one passes, mistress. Orders, and the milkwoman, no fool, goes quiet in the middle of a word, looks up at the palace, at the windows, at the smoke of your new-mended fires rising into the grey, and you watch her understand. You watch a milkwoman at a barred gate become one of the first common souls in England to guess the mightiest secret in Europe, and she picks up her pails without another sound and walks away down the lane very fast, and the porter swears under his breath, because everyone knows where she is walking fast to. You cannot bottle it. That is the lesson of that morning that Cecil himself, with all his ciphers, cannot beat. News of this size leaks through stone. It leaks in the shut gate itself, in the doubled guard, in the smoke from fires lit at strange hours, in the face of a porter. By mid-morning, Richmond town knows without one law being broken. By evening the road knows. But one leek that morning outruns all the others, and it goes on horseback, and this is Robert Carey's hour. Carey has been in the palace all night. He was warned days ago by his sister Lady Scrope to stay close, and when the end comes the council does exactly what he feared. They order the gates sealed and everyone kept in, him very much included, because they know precisely what he intends, and they want the news to reach Scotland from them, dressed in their letters, on their terms, with their names on it. And Sir Robert Carey, kinsman of the dead Queen, looks at the sealed gates of Richmond Palace, and at the assembled dignity of the Privy Council of England, and decides to jump the fence. The tale you piece together afterward, from Harry Pole's cousin in the stables, from a porter who was there, from Carey's own boasting years later, for he wrote it all down proudly, goes like this. His sister from inside the death chamber has promised him a token, a ring, a sapphire ring that King James himself once gave Carey to be returned as proof on this exact occasion. Proof that the news is true, that it comes from the innermost room, from the hands that close the Queen's eyes. Some tell it that Lady Scrope drew it from her finger and threw it down to her brother from a window while the doors were barred to him. However it passed, Carey gets his ring. Then he talks, bluffs, and kins his way through. He is, after all, a Carey. The guards have obeyed his family their whole lives. First out of the palace on the excuse of duty, then to the stables, where a horse is standing girthed because he has kept one girthed for a week. And between 9 and 10 o'clock on the morning of the 24th of March, the Queen not 8 hours dead, the council still drafting its proclamation, the gates still officially sealed. You're crossing the base court with an empty sling on your shoulder, and you hear it. Iron on stone, sudden and fast, a horse going from stand to gallop inside a courtyard, which is a sound like the start of a fight, and every head in the court snaps around, and there he goes, Sir Robert Carey, low over the neck of a bay horse, out under the gate arch. Someone has opened it for him or been overridden, no one ever quite admits which. And onto the river road, north side, hooves throwing gravel and gone. The sound of him hangs in the cold air after him, fading downstream. Hoofbeats and hoofbeats and hoofbeats, and every single person standing in that courtyard, lord or laundress, knows exactly what they are listening to. It is the news itself, leaving. The biggest secret in the world has just gone over the wall on 4 legs. Follow him for a moment, because it is one of the great rides. London first, where his brother and friends hold keys. Then north, on the Great North Road, on the relays of horses he has spent weeks planting like a careful gardener. Post stages roughly every 10 to 15 miles, a fresh horse at each, the old one left blowing and white with lather. He rides all that day and does not stop at dark. Something over 150 miles by the first night, Doncaster. 130 odd more by the second. His own house at Widrington, near the border, where he pauses only to order James proclaimed in the border towns at first light. On the third day, near the end, exhausted, a kick from a stumbling horse gashes his head open, and he rides the last stage bleeding through a bandage. And late on the night of Saturday, the 26th of March, the Queen not yet 3 days dead, the road still mud, the official couriers of the Council of England somewhere far behind him, Robert Carey, filthy, half dead, blood on his face, is knelt by the bed of James VI in Edinburgh, into which the King has already retired, and is saying the words he has crossed a kingdom to be first to say. Queen Elizabeth is dead, and your Majesty is King of England. And he puts the sapphire ring into the King's hand, nearly 400 miles in under 60 hours on horseback in March. The council never forgives him, and it scarcely matters. Kings remember the first face. That is what one man's ambition looks like when it is aimed well. And say this for him, his news was true, his ring was true, and no drop of blood was shed anywhere in England because of anything he did. He just made sure that when the future arrived, it had his mud on it. But you are not on the North Road. You're at Richmond, inside the barred gates, in a palace that must now perform the strangest costume change in its repertoire, from a house holding a dying queen to a house holding a dead one, while pretending for a few more hours to hold neither. The morning is all smoke and errands. Every fire in the staterooms is to be built up. The great chamber, the presence chamber, the galleries, because great men are coming and going, and the palace must not add cold to grief. And so you carry and carry and carry 16 trips, 20. You lose count for the first time in 11 months, your shoulder past aching into a kind of ringing numbness, splinters in the pad of your thumb that you dig out at noon with a needle borrowed from a laundress, your eyes gritty with a whole night unslept. Around you the household begins, very quietly, to mourn in the only ways permitted before the official mourning. A groom stands in the woodyard with his face in the crook of his arm, 1 minute exactly, then loads his sling and goes on. Mistress Aylmer's eyes are red-rimmed, and her back is straighter than a pike. In the kitchens, Martin cooks dinner for the whole household as on any day, because 200 living people are still 200 living people, and when a scullion begins to sniffle over the turnips, the big man says without heat, gently even, "None of that. Peel." And the boy peels, and the tears fall on the turnips, and the work goes on, and that, you understand years later, was the kindest thing Martin could have done for him. Upstairs, meanwhile, the council performs its last services to the woman who forbade the future for so long. The body is washed so far as she would ever have permitted, wrapped. The women who loved her keep the vigil. There will be no cutting her open. She had given her ladies to understand in life with force that she would not be embalmed and disembowelled like meat. And in this one last thing mostly they obey her. She is wrapped in cerecloth and sealed in lead, and let her keep her secrets. And down the river that same afternoon goes the official news at last, by barge and horse, to Whitehall, to the waiting lords. And now comes the day England had dreaded for 40 years, the day the old ones had prophesied blood over, the day the whole kingdom had been forbidden even to imagine. It is a Thursday, and here is what happens. Nothing. That is the miracle of the 24th of March, 1603, and I want you to feel the size of it. At about 10 in the morning, Carey barely out of earshot, the Privy Council, with the Lord Keeper and the heralds, rides from Richmond and Whitehall to the gates of the City of London, and at Whitehall Gate first, and then at the Cross in Cheapside in the heart of the city, before crowds that grow by the minute as the word runs down the lanes like water finding a drain, the proclamation is read, that the high and mighty Prince, James VI, King of Scotland, is now by the death of our late sovereign Queen Elizabeth of famous memory, become James I, King of England, France and Ireland. Cecil himself, they say, read it out, the little crooked man in the open street, reading aloud the document he had in every way that matters, spent 2 years secretly writing. The coach he built in the dark rolls out into daylight running perfectly, and no one can even prove there was a coach, and the crowds listen and take it. And do not burn anything, there are no risings. No rival claimant stands up in the shires, no Spanish sail on the horizon. The Catholic pamphlets about the Infanta blow away like leaves. The city watches stand all day with nothing to do. That evening, London is quiet. Quiet the way you're quiet after a doctor tells you the lump is nothing. And by nightfall, at the edges of that quiet, something begins that shames and comforts everyone at once. Bonfires, here and there, then everywhere, and men drinking healths in the streets. To King James, the very same streets that wept genuinely for the Queen that morning. Both things are true at the same time, and that is human beings for you. Grief for the woman, and under it, roaring up like fire through straw, 40 years of held breath let out at last. Not joy that she is gone, relief that the thing they feared, the war, the burning, the chaos of a disputed crown, is not coming. An eyewitness wrote that no funeral of a prince was ever so mourned, and no coronation so rejoiced at within the same 24 hours. At Richmond, you see the bonfires from the leads. This is the one liberty you take that night, and you take it because Harry Pole takes you. Come on, he says at dusk, when you're both hollow with sleeplessness and strange with grief, and he leads you upstairs you did not know existed, past the clock house, out through a low door onto the leads, the flat lead-sheeted roofs between Richmond's 14 turrets, where the wood boys are not permitted and the wind owns everything. You come out into the last light with your breath torn sideways and the whole valley of the Thames laid out around you, and you grab the parapet with both cracked hands and just look. The river is pewter, curving away east through the darkening water meadows toward London. West, upstream, the sky is still the colour of a peach where the sun went down, and the bare trees stand against it fine as pen strokes. Below you the palace courts glow, every window warm with the fires you fed all day, your own arm's work shining back up at you. And the gilded weather vanes stand around you on their turrets at eye level now, creaking and swinging, singing their thin song into the wind, closer than you've ever heard them, and you realise you're standing inside the crying of the palace at last. And far away east, downstream, where the sky has gone fully dark over London, you see them, points of orange light, scattered, flickering, some near the river, some deep in the mass of the town, bonfires, dozens, the city celebrating a king it has never seen, 10 miles from the unburied body of the Queen it will never see again. Harry stands beside you with his elbows on the parapet, and neither of you says anything for a long time, because there is a day when you both learned that everything worth saying is dangerous, and the habit holds. Then Harry says, to the wind more than to you, 44 years, and after a while, she were queen when my grandfather were a boy. And that is the whole eulogy the two of you manage, 15 and 18, on a roof in the wind. It is word for word what half of England is saying that night in exactly that tone. Not analysis, just arithmetic, the arithmetic of a fixed star falling. She was always there, and now there is only sky. Then the cold beats you off the roof, and you go down and you sleep like the dead for 11 hours, and no one wakes you, which is its own small morning gift from Mistress Aylmer, and you know it. Now the story enters its long, strange coda, and I am going to slow the pace down with it, because the fever of the thing is past, and what is left is the settling, and the settling, for a boy in your position, is where the meaning soaks in. The Queen is dead, but she does not leave Richmond for weeks. and she does not get buried for over a month. This is normal for monarchs. Nothing about a royal death is quick. The body, wrapped and sealed in its lead within a wooden coffin, lies first at Richmond, watched night and day by her ladies in relays, candles at the head and foot, and the wooden candles are yours to supply, so your service to her simply continues, changed in nature but not in rhythm. Dawn and dusk you carry to that room and kneel at that hearth, and the breathing is gone from behind you, and the first 3 times its absence is louder than it ever was. Then, on a night in late March or early April, they move her, by water, by night, the way she loved best to travel in life. A barge hung with black torches, the muffled oars, down the dark Thames from Richmond to Whitehall. Her last progress, past the sleeping riverbank villages, Mortlake, Putney, past fields and church towers she had known for 70 years, the torchlight sliding along the water beside her. You are not on the barge. You're on the river stair at Richmond in the dark with half the household, bareheaded, watching the black shape pull away downstream with its small fires doubled in the water, growing smaller and smaller and gone around the bend, and the slap of the wake arriving at the stair a long moment after. Cold water on cold stone, and that sound. The wake arriving after the barge is out of sight stays with you as the truest picture of what death is that you ever find. The boat gone, and the water still moving because of her. At Whitehall she lies in state for weeks, while the realm rearranges itself round the vacancy. And England fills those weeks with 2 things at once, mourning her and falling over itself to greet him. King James comes south from Edinburgh in April in a slow, triumphal progress, feasted at every great house on the road, hunting as he goes, mobbed by crowds so vast and hungry to see a man king, with a wife and children after 2 generations, that he grows alarmed at the press of them. Office seekers ride north to meet him coming. He knights men by the basketful on the road, hundreds before he even reaches London, and old courtiers mutter that honour itself is being cheapened by the gross. The future, it turns out, is not shy. The future is a crowd running downhill, and on the 28th of April, 1603, London buries her. You are there. The household of Richmond is brought down for it in blacks. You're issued mourning livery, black cloth coat, and you will keep that coat your whole life, and moths will eat it in a chest in Surrey long after you are grey. And you stand in the press along the way, as the funeral goes from Whitehall to Westminster Abbey, and it is the greatest thing your eyes have seen or will see. Above 1,000 mourners walking in order, the poor women, 200 and more of them, in blacks given by the crown, the servants, the heralds with their tabards, the horses trapped to the ground in black velvet, the lords and the ladies, the Archbishop, and in the middle of it, drawn by 4 horses hung in black, the chariot with the coffin, and on the coffin, this is the thing. This is what breaks the city open, the effigy, a full figure of the Queen, carved and painted to the life, dressed in her own robes of state with the crown on its head and the sceptre in its hands, lying on the purple pall as if asleep. As the chariot passes, the sound moves with it along the packed streets like a wave through a field. A sighing, a groaning, a weeping out loud of thousands of people at once. Men, the chronicler says, who had never been seen to weep. People who had never in their lives drawn breath under another ruler. Seeing her face, her managed, painted, immortal public face, the only face of hers they ever knew, going by them one last time, asleep on a coffin. You stand jammed between a fishwife and an old soldier, and the fishwife is saying over and over, not loudly to nobody, "There she goes, there she goes." And the old soldier is crying like a well and not wiping it, and you find that your own face is wet, and you had not noticed it happening, and you do not wipe it either. They lay her in Westminster Abbey, in her grandfather's chapel, in the north aisle, in the same vault as her half-sister Mary, the Catholic sister who once held her prisoner and nearly took her head. 2 sisters, 2 queens, 1 grave. Years later, King James will raise a great white monument over them both, and cut into it words that stop visitors still. Partners in throne and grave, here we sleep, Elizabeth and Mary, sisters, in hope of the resurrection. And in that same chapel, in the opposite aisle, James will bury his own mother, Mary Queen of Scots, whom Elizabeth killed, so that the 2 queens who never once met in life lie now a few paces apart forever, with the son of one and the heir of the other having arranged the whole quiet, terrible, forgiving geometry of it. And what becomes of you, Tom Aldry, carrier of wood, keeper of the last fires? The honest, unromantic answer is, the household is dissolved. That is what happens when a monarch dies. Her household dies with her, legally like a candle put out. Hundreds of people from the Lord Chamberlain to the turnspit boys are, in the space of a season, thanked, paid off, and let go, while the new king brings his own establishment south. Scots' voices in the galleries, new liveries, new tastes, new everything. Some of the old servants are taken on, most are not. There is a last muster in the great court at Richmond in May, and wages paid out with a little extra in respect of the sad occasion, and Mistress Aylmer shakes your hand like a man, and says, "You never dropped a log," which from her is a knighthood. Martin the cook gives you a half loaf and a fist on the shoulder that staggers you. Harry Pole is taken into a lord's house in the north, and you embrace in the woodyard like brothers, and swear to write, and you are boys, so you never do, and 50 years later you will still think of him every time you smell a wet beech log. And you walk home to Surrey down the same river you came up, with your wages in your shirt, your black coat in a bundle, the burn scar on your wrist, the ache gone deep and permanent into your right shoulder. You will feel that shoulder every cold morning for the rest of your life. A little bequest from Gloriana, and one thing more, which I have kept from you until now, and which you kept from everyone until you were old. On the morning after the death, that endless morning of smoke and errands, you were sent to clear the withdrawing chamber hearth, the cushion room, cold for the first time in a month because the watch had moved to where the body lay. The room was empty. The cushions were still there, stacked now against the wall in a column of crimson, waiting for the wardrobe men to fetch them away. And on the floor, in the rushes near where the cushions had lain, where it had worked loose, you suppose, from a sleeve or a coif or a cushion's trim in all those days and nights, a pin, a dressing pin, the kind of which great ladies use hundreds and the Queen's wardrobe bought by the thousand, a finger-length of drawn brass, gilt, with a little rounded head. Nothing. Worth a farthing, maybe, to a pin-woman. You knelt at the hearth with your brush and your pan, and you looked at it a long time, lying there in the rushes with the grey morning on it, the smallest possible relic of the largest possible life. Taking anything from a royal room is theft, and theft from the crown can hang you. You knew that the way you knew your own name. You took the pin. You carried it for 2 days folded in a scrap of linen inside your shirt, where it pricked you over the heart every time you bent. A fair arrangement, you thought. Let it prick. That is what it is for. And then you worked it into the seam of your black morning coat, under the collar where it stayed. And it was still there when the coat came home to Surrey, and when you married, and it was sewn by your wife, who was told the story on your wedding night and never once repeated it, into the lid of the wooden box where the christening cloths were kept, and it is there now, this minute, if the box survives, in some attic or some earth. One gilt brass pin from the floor of the room where the 16th century ended, keeping its secret with a discretion its first owner would have approved. Because that was her great art, wasn't it? The art you learned in her house without either of you intending it. What is not said holds. She never said who would succeed her, and so she reigned to her last breath. You never said what you saw, and so you kept your place and your skin and your 2 seconds of her eyes unspent forever. Years pass as they do. You farm in the end like your father, but better, because a boy who has managed the fires of a dying queen finds a farm's crises restful. You marry Joan of the next parish. Children, then children's children. The new reign grows old in its turn. You live to hear of the gunpowder treason 2 years after, when they nearly blew King James and his parliament to heaven. The country holds its breath again, and again does not burn. You live long enough for the word armada to become a grandfather's word, and for young men to roll their eyes at it. You live, in fact, deep into the next great convulsion, old, white, straight-backed at the church door, and you notice that as the world grows angrier, people speak of Queen Elizabeth's days the way people always speak of the time just before their own. Golden, simple, better. It was not simple. You carried its firewood. You know what it cost to keep even one of its rooms warm. But you let them have their golden age. Every generation needs one, and it is always the one before. And on winter nights, with the fire down low and the grandchildren piled against you like puppies, you tell it. Not all of it. The pin dies with the family women as agreed. But the rest, the cushions on the floor, the standing, must is not to be used to princes. The music through the door at midnight, the Archbishop's aching knees and the grip that would not release him, the hoofbeats going out under the gate arch, the bonfires from the roof. There she goes. There she goes. The little ones always ask the same 2 questions in the same order, and you always answer them the same way. Did you truly see her, grandfather? Once. She looked at me once. And why would she not lie down? And you look into the fire, an old man with a queen's ache in his shoulder, and you give them the answer it took you 50 years to be sure of. Because she knew what everyone else was too frightened to know, you say, that she was going to die. She knew it before the doctors and better than the doctors, and she was not afraid of it. A woman who lived her whole life an axe length from death, whose own mother died on a scaffold. She was long past fear. But she had spent 44 years learning exactly one trade. How to hold a kingdom together with nothing but her own person, her presence, her performance, her refusal ever to show them the ending. And she did not stop practicing her trade just because the last customer was death. Standing was the argument. As long as I stand, no one moves. As long as I stand, no one dares. And England did not move, and did not dare, and did not burn. The handover that everyone alive had feared for 2 generations passed as gently as a door swinging on a greased hinge. And men give the credit to Cecil's ciphers and Carey's horses, and they deserve their share. But you were in the room, or near enough, and you know where the stillness came from. It came from her. She held the kingdom still with her own 2 failing legs until every piece was in place, and only when there was nothing left to hold did she let them lay her down. And even then it was cushions first, and the bed only at the very last, and the bed only beat her because the body quit before the will did. The will never quit. You heard it in a grip on an archbishop's hand. More. That is the whole of it, you tell the children. That is what a great one looks like at the end. Not the paintings. A small grey woman standing in an empty patch of floor, holding up the roof of the world by refusing to sit down under it. Then the children sleep, and you sit a while with the fire the way you're sitting now. Before we let the fire burn down entirely, come back with me one more time, slowly now, no hurry left in anything, to the palace itself, because places have afterlives too, and Richmond's is worth a quiet minute in the dark. You went back once. Old. It was a long time coming. A man with a farm does not travel for sentiment, and Surrey to Richmond is a day there and a day back that the hay does not forgive. But one dry September, with the harvest in early, and your son's grown enough to be trusted with the world for a week, you walked it, slower than the boy walked it, stopping when your shoulder told you to, down the lanes, along the towpath until the river bent, and there it was across the water, the brick, the stone, the 14 turrets, the domes, smaller. Of course it was smaller. Everything from your 15th year is smaller when you go back. That is the tax the years charge on returning. But it was also quieter in a new way, a neglected way. King James had never loved it as she did, and the court's heart had moved elsewhere, and there was grass in a courtyard where no grass would have dared stand for 1 hour under Mistress Aylmer's eye. You stood on the far bank a long time. You did not cross. You watched the light move on the windows, some of them surely, the very panes her hand rested near, the very glass she looked through at this same river while you knelt behind her with apple wood in your arms. And you listened, and the wind came up the valley the way it always came, and faintly, thinly across the water the weather vanes began to sing. That undid you more than the funeral had. You stood on a public towpath, a grandfather, a churchwarden, a man of substance in his parish, and wept without shame into the collar of your coat. The black coat, yes. You had worn it on purpose, moth-holes and all, with its secret in the seam, because the veins were the same. The whole world had turned over. She was 30 years in her marble. The king who followed her was in his own grave by then. The young men rolled their eyes at Armada, and the palace itself was going soft at the edges like an old apple, and the veins still cried in the wind exactly as they cried above your attic bed when you were 15, and thought the palace was weeping and did not yet know for whom. I will tell you what you could not know standing there, what no one standing there could have borne to know. Within your grandchildren's lifetime the palace would be gone, sold off in pieces in the years of England's great convulsion, stripped, quarried for its stone and brick like a carcass on a hillside, until almost nothing remained. A gateway, a few walls folded into later houses, a name on the land. Travellers today walk across Richmond Green past a modest brick arch with worn stone above it, and mostly do not stop, and behind and around that arch, invisible, stand all of it. The base court where the hoofbeats rang, the woodyard, the spiral stair that ate your knees, the passage with the joint stool, the room with the cushions, grass and good houses and a green where the withdrawing chamber was. The room where the 16th century ended has been open sky for 350 years, and yet nothing is wholly gone, and here is the proof, the small strange proof, and it is my favourite fact in this whole story, so I have saved it for last, for the edge of sleep. The date, the 24th of March, her last day, was, in the old reckoning, the last day of the year. And when England, long after, finally changed its calendar, that old year's end left a ghost in the machinery, the taxes. The English tax year, to this day, 4 centuries on, begins in early April, because it once began on the 25th of March, New Year's Day, old style, and was merely nudged along when the calendar shifted, which means that every single year, without knowing it, an entire modern nation still keeps a rhythm whose root is the year end she died on the very hinge of. She timed her exit to the turning of a page, and the page, in its bureaucratic, deathless, thoroughly English way, is turning still. She would have liked that, I think. She always did understand better than anyone that the trick of immortality is not marble. It is habit. So, enough. The fire is low, and you have earned the dark. Let the palace go first. Let the brick and the turrets and the gilded vanes sink back into the September light across the water, and let the old man on the towpath dry his face and turn for home, satisfied, because he came to see if any of it had been real, and it had, all of it, every log and every silence. Let the boy go next. 15, cracked knuckles, goose-wing in his fist, backing out of one room after another for 11 months, bowing to doors, saying nothing, seeing everything. He is safe. He always was, though he did not know it. Safe the way the small and faithful are sometimes safe in great houses, beneath notice, beneath suspicion, beneath the wind. Let him climb the black spiral one last time with his rushlight spitting, and let him sit down on the joint stool in the warm dark of your imagination, and keep his watch there forever, listening. And let her go last, because she would insist on it. Let her stand a while yet if she wants to. She has earned the standing more than anyone ever earned anything. Let her stand at the window in the silver-white gown with her hand flat on the cold stone, watching the river she was born beside and died beside, the Thames that carried her as a prisoner to the Tower at 21, and carried her out of Richmond in torchlight at 69, and then, when she is ready, only when she is ready, must is not a word we use, let her women ease her down at last onto the crimson cushions, and let the musicians take up their places in the corner of the dark, and let the old Archbishop kneel, and let the hand hold his, and let the word it signs be the word it always signed. More prayers, more music, more river under more windows. There was never enough of anything for her. That was the engine of the whole astonishing life, and it is the one appetite that death itself could only interrupt, not answer. The breathing slows now. You can hear it if you lie very still, your own breathing, I mean, though for a moment in the dark it is easy to lose track of whose is whose, and that is all right. That is how this is supposed to work. Slow and slower, the snags smoothing out, the gaps growing kind. Centuries will pass. They have passed already. You and I are proof. The palace will fall and the green will grow over it. The bells will change their voices and the river will be embanked and bridged and lit, and the road Carey galloped will be paved and numbered, and men will cover his 3 days' ride in 5 hours without once bleeding from the head. The last person who ever saw her face will die, and then the last person who ever spoke to someone who saw her face, and still she will not manage to be forgotten. The one thing, the single thing, that stubborn will could never have arranged for itself, given to her freely by everyone after. But people do not change. That is the secret under all these stories. The reason they work at midnight. Somewhere tonight someone is sitting up with a dying grandmother, keeping the fire in. Somewhere tonight someone is carrying something heavy up a stair for someone who will never know their name. Somewhere someone is holding a hand that grips back hard and signs, "Stay." The kingdoms change their kings, and the calendars change their pages, and the human watch in the small hours does not change at all. You have kept a good watch tonight. The fire is fed. The door is shut soft. Nothing more is asked of you. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way it took a tired boy in a palace attic 400 years ago, with the wind singing thinly in the vanes above the roof. Let the room fade. Let the river run on in the dark without you, the way it always has and always will. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. She stood as long as there was anything to stand for. You may lie down. Good night.